chance. Worrying, honey, give it one more chance. Hey, worrying, honey, give it one more chance. Worrying, honey, give it one more chance.
Hello? Can you hear me now? Is that better? Just let me know if I'm loud enough or if the music is too loud or any of the above. Okay. Let me do. Okay. So I'm just loading up the clips real quickly. You can still hear me fine. Okay. So I'm just gonna make a new module. I'm just gonna name it Lauren, just because I'm working with you currently. I can also send this to you once I'm done with it, if you would like to see it or have it hands-on. So I also have pulled up here your programming algorithm. So I just need to remind myself of what you're doing. You're doing ACT progress check. So I think what we talked about was having it kind of track your grades as you're going through. So you have your math grade, it checks it, stores it, and then kind of shows you a progress report of some sort. So the first thing you're going to need is if you want it to track your grades, you're going to need to be able to save your grades somewhere. So you're going to need to be able to write a file. So you can just define, I'm going to start, here, I'll start writing it as pseudocode. So you need to make a way, well, this is more like an algorithm, but make a way to save the file, or not the file, but save the ACT scores as they are given. Then you also need to make a way to access those the saved ACT scores, because once you have the ACT scores in whatever you're saving it as, you also need to be able to access those files. Third, you need to you'll need to display, these are like large, but then you'll need to display the scores, so past and present. So these are large, these have a lot of sub units within them. I'm just going to start with that. So we'll define a function, we'll call it save, and it'll start off with no parameters right now, but it may add parameters as we go, because we may decide that we need to add something. But so basically you're going to need to save these scores. And the best way to do that is to do it with the open, or with the TXT file. So with open, and you can name this file whatever, because what Python does is if you try to open a file that doesn't exist, it will create that file. So if I just do file.txt, and I open it as write, because I'm trying to write into it. So I'm saying with open as f. So with this file .txt called, we'll open it as file. So now the name of this is called file. You're going to do file.write, and then whatever you put in here is going to write that file. What is the W? Oh, the W stands for write. So it can be, so I'll write this, right, I'll do it on the line above it. So open is a function that opens a file. The first parameter is the name of the file. If the file doesn't exist, Python will create the file. The second parameter is how you are opening the file. Read, write, or both. And you denote that with either a R, a W, or R plus, I think it is. So R plus, you'll be able to read and write. W is just write. R is read. But then, so with this file, you can do file.write, and then whatever you write in here is I am writing to a file, period. And then we'll end this function with a return. Now, if I call this function, so that's calling the function. And right now that's all my program does, because it just got that function and then this one line. So if I run this, run as Python run, you'll see a file pop up on my left hand side. So this, is it blurry on your screen or is it just on mine? Okay. Maybe it's just blurry on mine because it's small. But so on this left hand side, there's file.txt, and if you open it, I am writing to a file. And so every time you open it as write, now let's say I change this. I'll just type my name. If I run this again now, it'll change the text that's in here, because it'll basically write over the file. So that's called like overwriting, and it'll overwrite that file. So what we're going to do with this is we're going to with this file.write, we don't know exactly what we're going to write yet, but so we'll come back to this. But what I'm assuming we'll do is we'll have we will write the scores from the ACT. So it I'm assuming it'll look something like we'll write like math : 24 23, 25. So those are the 3 scores they got. And then on the next line, we'll write English 21, 20, 30. And when we get this, since this is what will be in the file, when we read the file, we can kind of see what we'll be able to reread those scores, and it's easy to read because it's separated by colons and commas, and there's no spaces that'll get in the way. So it'll just store all of our data basically. But we'll come back to that once we figure out how we want to store how we want to store the scores, because it'll depend on that. Then the other function that we have to do is we can call it load. Basically you're loading the because you save something and then you have to load it. So now you're gonna say with open file.txt, and we're gonna open as read this time because we're reading it. Oops, with open as file. We're gonna do file.read line. So this reads every single line in the function. So since if we have this file and if we have multiple lines, so right now that has 3 lines. If we read this, if we do this file.read, it's going to return all 3 of those lines, and it's going to be in a list. So there's going to be actually, let me pull up one sec. I want to be able to draw so I can visualize this. Yeah. So when it returns that, it's going to return those 3 lines as 3 individual things. So where's like a paintbrush or something? Guess a circle will work. So like, there's one line. There's another. And then there's another. So then it's going to return all 3 of those lines, and we can store that in a list. And like be 1, 2, and 3. So then we can store that in a list, and so this will be, there'll be 3 items, but it'll be at index 0, because indexes start at zeros. So it'll be 0, 1, 2, 3. So we have this list equal to file.readLines. I'm actually gonna do because that Google is just annoying me. But so we have this list that now stores however many lines the file has. And then with that list, we want to split that data. So let's just say that we're going to keep this syntax. So every time we save a file, we're going to save it with the course and then the 3 or however many scores there are with how many ever comments there are. So we'll make a list. So we'll take this list. We'll go through this list, x0, while x is less than length of list. So length, we're starting x at 0, and then we're going to do x equals x plus 1. So then it'll start at 0, and then it'll keep looping through the list until it hits the end, and it'll keep adding one until it gets to the end. And we'll take this list item at at 0 or at x. So x will start at 0, which is the first item, and these are really bad names for variables because it's very, but we'll split this list via the colon. So now in this split list, okay. So I just want to use the paintbrush. Okay. So we have list, whoops. And that has 0, 1, 2. And so it's got those 3 elements, and then it's got those 3. Boop. Boop. And so in this spot right here, this, that is a really bad arrow. Boop, boop, is just a string that says math : 24, 23, 25. Whoops, and I even spelled that wrong. And then in this one is English. You're good. No, you're good. Someone else just came into the room, so I'm just talking to them. They're fine. So then in this list, in the second element, it's just English. Yes. Yeah. So the list is going to have, this first list has each of the elements as one thing. Then this split list is going to take this, and it's going to say, and it's going to split it on this colon. Whoops. So then I'm going to make this new list that's going to have 2 elements. One, it's going to be 0 and 1. And then this is the string list. And yeah, feel free to interrupt me if this makes sense to you. But then so in this first item, it's going to be math And then in the second item, it's going to be 24, 23, 25. So now if I make these bigger so that you can see that. Math. And 23, 24, 20, or 24, 23, 25. So it took this right here and it split it on that colon into this new string list that has the first item is math and the second item is this. And we want to do that for every single... Oh, I never made this English bigger. This item is the English one. But, so we want to do this for each type. Like subs of list. It's kind of like subs. If we have the same definition, then yeah, it's kind of like subunits of it. So string list is just going to store math and 24, 23, and 25. Yes. So we're going to have lists that will store math, math and then the math scores, English and the English scores, and blank and the blank scores. So at the top of our file, we're going to make these lists. We're going to make science list, or we'll name it science scores, and it'll just equal an empty list. And then we'll make math scores, and it'll equal an empty list. And English scores equals an empty list. And then, so since these are made at the top, because remember, Python is a top-down program, so it starts at the top and goes down the code. This load function will be able to access them. So instead of using, so we will use this split list, but if split list at 0, so that's the first item. So if we go to this split list, if the first item of list is math, and that would mean that the first item of string list is math. You following me on that? So if the first item of split list, item 0 of split list, equals math, then we're going to say math scores. We're going to call this dot append, and we're going to append two things. We're going to append, or no, one thing. We're going to append split list at 1. Because remember, split list at 0 is math. Split list at 1 is the scores. And then all we have to do is split this. Oh. Whoops. Okay. Sorry. We're not going to do append. We're going to do equals string. Oh, no, not string. Split list at 1 dot split upon at the comma. Does that make sense? So now we're going to take this split list at 1, which equals all these scores, and we're going to take them and split it by comma. And remember that every time you yes, I can totally slow down. So we have I'll let you type this up. We have this list called list that has all it's going to have math, English, and science scores in it. And we're splitting that list by line, or wait a minute. Or yeah. So then we're going through each line of that list and we're saying we're going to make this split list, and we're going to, so we have math, English, science. We're at the math section, we're going to split it and make it equal the string list. And we're going to say, okay, the first item is going to equal math. The second item is going to equal 23 or 24, 23, 25. And remember, both of these are string values. So technically both of these have this. Nope, not that. Not that either. That. All of these have these quotes around them because they're all technically strings. Oh, what did I just do there? So this has a string. This is a string. Oh, you just can't see the double quote. So now we have all these strings. So this first string is going to be split by this colon, and it's going to be split into another list that has math and 24, 23, 25. So then we're going to check, because there could be multiple, since there's going to be math, English, and science, and we technically don't know which one will be first. We don't know if indentation does matter. So use the tab key. And so everything that's, if you see this, like this is one tab in from define, and then this is one tab in from with, this is one tab in from while. So if it's ever messed up, you can just delete all the spacing and then just go one tab in. This all has to be a tabbed in, because so for this width, we want all of this stuff underneath it to happen, so it has to be tabbed in. And for your second question, yes, I can help you with the comments. Okay. So are we good to go on to add the next couple of if statements that we're going to add? Okay. So we have to check if the first item equals math, English, or science, because we don't know which one is going to be which. So we're just going to do this over again. We're going to say if split list at 1, or no, not 1, 0, equals English. Then we're going to set English scores equal to split list at 1 dot split by comma. So we're only going to account for two different or for 3 things right now, so you'll have to add the other ones for what's the other? I don't know the other test scores. You know them. I believe in you. You'll figure it out. I can't remember the names of them. So, oh yeah, and then science scores equals split list at 0, nope, 1 dot split by comma. So, with all of these 3 things, if it equals math, it's going to put it in the math scores. If it equals English, then it's going to go in the English scores. If it's in the science, then it's going to equal the science scores. Does that make sense? Sweet. So I know it's a lot of lists, but so we have this big list that has math, English, and science. Then we took one of those items and we're splitting it into string list. So then string list is going to be math and the scores that it has. Now remember, there can be more than 3 scores. There can be 1,000,000 scores. Because this code will handle however many scores there are. So there's math, and then there's so the math, the first section of it is checked, is split into math, and then 23, 24, 23, 25. And then we're taking this section right here, and we're making we're splitting it again into a list of 3 items. 0, 1, 2, 24, 20, whoops, that was horrible. 23, 25. Almost looks like my real handwriting. Okay. So, now we have this list, and whatever this list is, we'll set it to either, if it's supposed to be an English score, then we'll set it to English. If it's supposed to be, so this list item that we have will be set to whatever this first item equals. So if this first, which the first item is index 0, so if at index 0 it's math, then if math, you're going to set it to the math scores. If English, we'll set it to the English scores. If science, set it to the science scores. And then so talking about it in another way, dot split takes a string and brings it back as a list. So it takes this string and it brings it back as this list right here, because it's a string here and it splits it into 2 items and puts those items in a list format. Same thing with this. It's takes this list of 3 numbers and converts it into that, and splits it by comma. So this while loop goes through the whole length of the list, of this original list. So it goes through the length of list, and for each one, it splits the colon, so then it it sets split list to either math, English, or science, and then it sets the scores equal, or it sets, if it was the math scores, it goes into the math scores list. So now that is technically loaded into our list, and now we can use these lists to print out the data. So I think this load function is then done. So now that's done, and that's done, so then we can just return. And since the lists are technically stored outside of the function, because if these lists were stored inside the functions, we'd have to return like the lists, but they're stored outside, so we're just editing them. Editing them, whatever. So now that we know what our lists are going to look like how we're storing them, we can come back to this save file. So we can say, okay, we're going to have math. So we're going to have to do this we're going to have to write 3 different scores. We're going to have to write the math list, the English list, and the science list. So we're going to say while, I'm going to do x equals 0. We're going to say while x is less than the length of math scores, we're going to file dot write math colon, and then we're also going to file dot write math scores at x. So this will write math. It's going to write math with a colon. Then it's going to write each score blank by blank by blank. Does that make sense? And we can repeat this whole thing two more times, and we'll have English scores and what's the other one? Science scores. Science scores. So it's going to go through the math list. And it's going to write... Oh, whoops. So, I messed up the code here. Besides forgetting to change this from math and math. This code right now would write... The output would be math colon 23. Math colon 24, math colon 25. And that's not what we want. We want it to be commas. But since this math repeats, since this file.write repeats every time, that original thing is how it would turn out. So all we have to do is move this out here. And add onto this, because we need it to also add the commas, because the commas aren't stored within the files. They're not stored with the scores, so we have to add them manually ourselves. I'll move these out as well. Boop. You can also just delete them and rewrite them. Am I spelling English wrong? Or am I just stupid? Why does it keep highlighting? English. Okay. No. Know how to spell. Keeps underlining it, so I think I'm stupid. And then science. Oops. Move that out. So now that we have this, let's test it. Oh, wait. There's one other thing we forgot to do. Because if x doesn't count, then x is never going to move. Or if x doesn't get added by 1 every loop, then the loop will just keep going in a circle because it's waiting for x to eventually reach the length, but it never will because it never increases. So it'll just keep printing the same score over and over. So we had to add x equals x plus 1 in each one is, we just had to add the x equals x plus 1. So let's test this. Let's add this. We'll just add a couple scores. You don't have to test on yours if you don't want to, but you can as well. So we got the math scores, English scores, and science scores. So I just added in some default scores, and then we'll run this save function. And so it'll take this save and it'll try to write all these scores. So if we run this, we got an error. So you can't use the plus for int and string. Interesting. So what's happening is it views this as an integer. So, oh, that's because these are integers. So we have to make these strings, not integers. Because when we save them, or when we load them, every time you load from a txt, it's going to be a string, unless you convert it to an integer. But since we know it'll be a integer, or since we know it'll be a string, we'll test this program as a string, and we'll treat it as a string. So now it ran. So now to test if we actually got it right, we'll look at this. Oh no, we got it wrong, because we have it wrote this all on one line, and we don't want it on one line. We want it on multiple lines. And then we also don't want this last comma. We only want it in between these two things. So how are we going to solve this? Well, there's a couple of ways to do it. So we're going to delete it first. And we're going to make an if statement. If x equals length of math scores, So if x equals sorry, not 2 equals, 2 equals to compare, 1 to set. So if x equals, this means, oh wait, minus 1. Because the length will return 3, but x is only going to go up to 2 because x goes by the indexes. If that makes sense, because it only goes until it's less than length. Once it reaches the same as length, it'll stop the loop. But if x is the same, so if it's the same as the length, basically saying that we're on the very last item, then we're going to write, file dot write. We're going to write a comma. So if we're on the last, or no, not a comma. If we're on the last one, we're going to make a new line because we want it to enter down. Else, we're not at the last line, so we're going to file dot write a comma. So then we'll replace this in each of these. So now, if we try running it, works out fine, and it works. So we're saying if it's on the last line, then you're going to print a new line. If it's on the same line, then it's going to print a comma. Does everything make sense so far? Any questions about what we've done with the save and the load file so far? Do you want me to explain anything again? Do you have any specific questions? Oh, there's the else statement. Okay. So I think we'll call it a night for tonight. We can hop on this weekend perhaps, or again next week Wednesday, and go over some more. You are so correct. We're lucky right now because since they were all the same length, there wasn't a problem, but science. Yep, you are correct. So for this, we'll call it good for this session. We'll go over it again. We can, if you want to work on it by yourself, you can. So what I would say you have left is So I think this this load file works. I'm not too sure. We'd have to implement a test to test it. So we'd have to say like load, and then we'd have to print out the things. So, and I don't think we need to do that right now. But basically, to do, and that's fine, going through it together. But I am going to ask, because we're doing just so much together, I'm totally fine with helping you, but I want to make sure that you at least have enough knowledge of it to replicate this a little bit. So I'm only doing the math, English, and science, and I'm hoping you will be able to add to the save and load functions to bring in the reading and the writing test scores. So you just have to add a little bit to here. You'd have to add an if statement, 2 if statements to here, and 2 while loops to here. But I think you can do that. So our checklist. But so there's still a couple other things. We still have to display the scores, and people still need to be able to input their scores. So next session, we'll set up, we'll make a function to print the scores. So it'll print like example. It'll be like math, or on the math test you got 24, then 25, then 26. And it'll keep going on until it reaches all the scores. And then it'll do that for each score. So we have to do that, make a function to print the scores. Then we have to allow users to add new scores. So that would be as easy though as saying like making a new variable like new score equals input. What did you get on the math? And we say, so then new score is going to equal whatever they type in. So if they type 25, that's what new score will equal. And we'll say math scores dot append 20 or new score. And so it's going to add that item to the end. And then since we'll have the save function, it'll save that at the end. So those are the 2 things we can do together next time. And then the final thing you'll have to do is write for all of these things, because we did together math, English, and science. For you'll have to add a reading and a writing section. Sound like a plan? No problemo. So does Saturday work for you? If I come on and stream at like 1 p.m. on Saturday? Otherwise, I can do again next week. I think I should be able to do next week Wednesday. Might be a little tighter next week Wednesday, or we might have to push it later. But either way, we'll set up a time for us to meet again. And otherwise we can do it later. But yeah, just connect with me on email. This will go up this will stay up on YouTube. So if you have any questions about anything, you can rewatch it. Otherwise, you can email me if I didn't explain something correct. I am going to log off. Thank you for coming out, and I will see y'all later.